We did the running backs earlier today. Now it is time to go through every single matchup for Week 12 fantasy football to find who the must-start and sit wide receivers are. And of course, the reason it's on Saturday is because there's lots of good injury updates and news that we didn't have on Thursday, Wednesday. That's why we do it on Saturdays, guys. And I'm one of the only fantasy football YouTubers working on the Saturday after Thanksgiving. So please go down there, drop a like on this video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Let's go ahead and dive right into these matchups right now. Tampa Bay at Indianapolis is the first matchup here. Mike Evans and Michael Pittman are both must starts. Mike Evans has just simply the ceiling that he's always had. I've said this over the week. I think this season has been a statement season from him, saying to everybody, I am a Hall of Fame wide receiver when I retire. I've been so impressed with him this season, and he's taken on a matchup against the Colts who have been better defensively, but it's not because of the fact that they don't give up yardage. They give up yardage. They're a bend but don't break defense that gets turnovers and that gets after your quarterback. That's why I like them in a fantasy football sense, but from a yardage perspective, they can give up a lot of yards. So that's why Mike Evans continues to just be must start. Michael Pittman, target share, wide receiver 1, upside to get in the end zone. The guy is playing very well on a contract year. You continue to play Michael Pittman as well. Chris Godwin and Josh Downs are flexible. They're really both in the same tier at this point, whereas if Josh Downs was not injured, I would have him as a more high upside flex option. The reality is, if he comes in and if he plays, he will be limited by that knee injury that has plagued him for the past several weeks now. Even after the bye week, he couldn't get it right. So there's an issue here with Josh Downs for sure. Chris Godwin is just as flexible to me because they're basically seeing the same amount of targets. Josh Downs is a better player when healthy, but Chris Godwin still can get you a steady 10 points in fantasy. Not a high-end option at all. Neither of them are, but they're both flexible, and then everybody else is irrelevant. New England Patriots at the New York Giants. The most unfriendly matchup possible for any fantasy wide receiver is this matchup right here. Nobody's must start, and Demario Douglas is the only one I have any interest in flexing. Demario Douglas absolutely can be flexed because he's consistent with his target share. He's not going to have much upside. He won't give you a 25-point game, but this guy can get you a 12 to 14-point game because of the targets that he sees. Darius Slayton, if you want to take a deep shot, based on what he did last week, I understand it. I would not torture my audience personally with saying that he's a great option this week. Everybody else, do not start any other Saints. Do not start any other Patriot or Giant wide receiver. It's ugly and disgusting. Pittsburgh Steelers at the Cincinnati Bengals. I'll say Jamar Chase is still a must start because of the player that he is. He's a great player, one of the best players in the league right now. But I've not been shy about this all week. This is a player that simply just has his upside capped without Joe Burrow. There's no question to me. We haven't seen it yet, enough of it at least. This is Jake Browning's first start, but I can't see how the upside's the same. I just can't. Deontay Johnson, George Pickens are flexible. I've been asked a lot this week, how do you think this offense changes without Matt Canada? And my answer is consistent. It will not change. And I can tell you for a fact why. The reason it won't change is because I've been watching this team since I can remember being alive. This team, since Todd Haley was the offensive coordinator for several years, got fired after 2017, has been the exact same offense. Under Randy Fichtner, some of you may not even know who this guy is. He was the offensive coordinator with Big Ben Roethlisberger the past several years. That was Big Ben's best friend in the coaching staff at the time. The offense he ran was identical to the Matt Canada offense. Matt Canada takes over, same exact offense. So why is that? The reason is because Mike Tomlin, as the head coach, does not like to take risks. He doesn't want to turn the ball over, and the reason is because he's a defensive coach, and they all share that in common. Low risk, let's win the ugly games. That's how Mike Tomlin runs the offense because he is in charge of this team, and the offensive coach, that's a puppet. I'm just telling you from watching this over the years. So Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, they've still got upside because they're good players to have a good game. I'm just saying to you, if you're expecting more consistency from these players, you're just not, it's not going to happen. It's just simply not going to happen. Tyler Boyd is flexible because there's no T. Higgins, but I would not, personally, I would play the Steelers wide receivers over Tyler Boyd. And then T. Higgins, obviously, no. Trenton Irwin, if Joe Burrow was there, I would say, let's do it. But he's not there, so I would not say go Trenton Irwin. Carolina Panthers at the Tennessee Titans. Adam Thielen remains must start, only because of target share. And the matchup is good against the Tennessee Titans secondary. So I would say Adam Thielen, for the most part, for most weeks, will be in must-start territory until I see the worst team in the league just say, we're just done for the year. We're not going to risk hurting any of our best players. That's what I'm concerned with long-term for Thielen, but right now it's not in the cards. DeAndre Hopkins is a high-end flex option. Against the Carolina Panthers, the matchup is certainly there. Hopkins is always so similar to Amari Cooper. This guy is capable of a 25-point game. He's also capable of giving you 2 points. What do you want to do? Do you want to take the risk? I would take the risk against the Carolina Panthers because the upside is there. And his quarterback, although been struggling, the deep ball is there. He's a good quarterback, just needs to find his way. So Hopkins is definitely a high-end flex option. And then if you've got Treylon, if you've got Mingo, I think you're wasting a roster spot. Jacksonville at Houston this week. Lots of wide receiver options here and lots to discuss. Tank Dell, Christian Kirk, Nico Collins, all must starts. I've discussed this week. I admitted to my audience, because I want to be honest with you guys, I was wrong about Nico Collins and Tank Dell. For the longest time this season, I've been saying Nico Collins over Tank Dell. I was wrong. It's Tank Dell over Nico Collins. It's obvious at this point who CJ Stroud has the best chemistry with. They're both great options. I think Nico Collins can still be started with confidence because he can get you a 30-point game. He absolutely can because he is a very good player, and the quarterback is already, I would say, a top 8 quarterback in the league. You could start both of these Texans wide receivers, and especially with Noah Brown complicating things. Start both these Texans receivers, and I still prefer Kirk over Ridley. 1 week is not going to do it for me. Kirk is consistently seeing the best target share in the offense. There's no question who the wide receiver 1 is for Trevor Lawrence. Now let's talk about Calvin Ridley. He's a decent flex option. I'm not bending and saying this is a great must start. Calvin Ridley I've compared him to Gabe Davis over the past several weeks. That's exactly what I see when I watch Calvin Ridley. The ability to give you a 30-point game, even 35 points, is absolutely there. I'm not discounting that. But the just as likely opportunity that he could give you nothing it's literally just as likely. I've seen the theory about Zay Jones being there with Calvin Ridley being a good thing. I think that theory has merit. I think it's got a base to it. I need to see more of it though. And it's not even Calvin Ridley's fault. We haven't seen enough of Zay Jones. And we may not again this week. So to me, Calvin Ridley, he's a risk. He's a big, big risk. I would never play Calvin Ridley over Christian Kirk. I just would not do it. Calvin Ridley is a risk, high upside, but very, very high risk type of guy. Like I said, Zay Jones may not play. And even if he does, he doesn't even have 100 receiving yards this year. Just don't do it. And then Noah Brown is out, so you can't play him. New Orleans at Atlanta this week. Chris Olave remains a must start. He's just disappointing in a lot of senses. I wish he would do more with the opportunities he's given, but even if Winston starts over Derek Carr, it doesn't ultimately take away Chris Olave's opportunity as a starter. In a matchup where I think he'll do well, Chris Olave remains must start. Drake London, Rashid Shaheed, they're both flexible. Drake London I prefer over Rashid Shaheed because he has a more consistent target share as the wide receiver one. But Rashid Shaheed, if you're looking for a big play, absolutely could happen because Michael Thomas is now out. So I think that the big playability with Rashid Shaheed is there. Michael Thomas on the IR, missing the next 4 games at the very least. You may be wondering, who is A.T. Perry and why is he on here? A.T. Perry is a rookie 6th-round pick for the New Orleans Saints. They actually traded up to get him in this previous draft. Now, the reason he's on here is because I highlighted A.T. Perry in my 2023 Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide, and I said, this guy is a legit player. He's a big target at 6'3" and about 200 pounds, and he can run really crisp routes for his size. A.T. Perry, in his first NFL game action last week, 2 catches for over 40 yards. This guy can play. I don't think it's his time yet, but keep your eye on A.T. Perry. That is a public service announcement for my audience because if he continues to see more targets and does work with them, he could be a sleeper wide receiver for your fantasy football playoffs. Los Angeles Rams at the Arizona Cardinals. Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp. I know we've had issues. I'll continue to start them. The reality is with here, they're both looking like they're going to play. Again, important to film on Saturday because we got that news today. They both look like they're going to play. So it ultimately comes down to this right now. I can't see myself endorsing you benching Puka or Cooper Kupp for someone like a Hollywood Brown. I just can't see it. Now, if Cooper Kupp flops again, we'll discuss that next week in the next week of prep. I'm not there yet. Not there yet. I'll continue to start Kupp. Definitely start Puka though for sure. Hollywood Brown, like I said, flexible. Upside, I think, is there. We just haven't seen it yet. Like I said, there's a lot of concern here I have, but at the end of the day, Kyler raises his upside. So if he comes out with 8 targets this week, I don't want that on my audience's bench. I think he's flexible, and he's in the higher tier of flex options. And Rondale Moore is a no. He had 1 catch last week for a touchdown. That's fantastic, but that's not sustainable. And then you've got Michael Wilson out again, so that's a no-go. Cleveland Browns at the Denver Broncos here. Nobody's must start. While acknowledging Amari Cooper, Courtland Sutton, they're both in the high end flex category. Amari Cooper honestly would have been a must start for me this week because I think that another week with Dorian Thompson-Robinson prep as the starter, I think that he's going to continually get better because Dorian Thompson-Robinson, much like A.T. Perry, who I just discussed, is a player I believed in and highlighted in my 2023 Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide. With the matchup against Pat Surtain, that is the part that makes him a flexible option rather than a must start. Courtland Sutton, the reality is the matchup is not easy, but this guy, I've said it all week. I've said it for weeks now. When you've got a guy who's had this many touchdowns, he's had 8 receiving touchdowns this year. When you've got a guy who's been scoring this consistently, it's usually unpredictable. Touchdowns are usually the most unpredictable stat in fantasy football. This is a unique case. It's not as unpredictable when your red zone usage is as outrageously high as Courtland Sutton's. It's through the roof what his red zone production is. That's why you can count on him. Honestly, you can almost count on him scoring a touchdown. You can. I think that his floor is not that high, but his ceiling, about 20 points. It's good stuff. Elijah Moore is a middle to low tier flex option. He's been doing more with his work over the past 7 weeks. The target share has always been there this year for him. He just always has it. He never did anything until recently. So if you want to, if you're in a deeper league, you've got injuries, I can understand this one. I just wouldn't endorse it over a lot of guys. And at Jerry Jeudy, I continue to sit him. I just don't. I get it. Some weeks he'll have it. Some weeks he won't. Ultimately, this is not a player I'm interested in. Buffalo at Philadelphia. A.J. Brown, you fire him back up. I saw some concerned audience members after A.J. Brown's performance against Kansas City, and I get it. I totally get it. When you're watching a Monday Night Football game and a player who is supposedly one of the best players in the league does that, I can understand the concern. just don't forget what he's done this year for you. He's been responsible for winning you tons of games this year. There's no questions for me with A.J. Brown. Stephon Diggs, I continue to play him as well. Same concerns. Very similar. Now, he doesn't have the ceiling of A.J. Brown on a weekly, consistent basis. But Stephon Diggs is, to me, like, we discussed this over the week. I said he was a buy low candidate. This is a player that you just simply don't put on your bench because he has the ability to get you a 30 to 35 point game. You don't put that on your bench. I don't care if he's been giving you 4 or 5 fantasy points, which he has been doing. You continue to play this guy. Devonta Smith, you can play him as well. Last week, had a good week again. Reality is, it's always going to go back and forth between him and A.J. Brown. But the other reality is you don't put either of them on your bench because they're both high upside plays. Gabe Davis, always going to be flexible. The guy is, there's no rhyme or reason why he has a good game and why he has a bad game. No rhyme or reason at all. Always capable, so if you want to take the shot, there's always merit to it. Khalil Shakir, Deontay Hardy, no goes. Kansas City at Las Vegas for this week. Davante Adams, fire him back up. Had another bounce back performance last week. You play Davante Adams. Target share is there. They want to get this guy the ball. And with the target share he sees, he's simply too good of a player to not pop off. Davante Adams definitely must start. Jacoby Myers and Rashee Rice are basically in the same tier for me. Jacoby Myers' ceiling is significantly dropped without Jimmy Garoppolo, and I said this was predictable. Him and Jimmy G had chemistry from New England. He ran the routes that Jimmy G could throw. Aiden O'Connell's a different quarterback. He's just not targeting Jacoby Myers as much. So it lowers the ceiling. Rashee Rice, even that, like, I think that he's been the best Kansas City wide receiver. He is the best Kansas City wide receiver. There's still no consistency there. He's the best one of the bunch, the only one I would flex. And as you can see, Kansas City Chiefs, I would bench the rest of them. They're all embarrassing. The reality is, a lot of people saw all their drops the other night. But the problem is, they've been doing that for a long time. So there's lots of issues I have with Kansas City wide receivers. And that's why I'm not telling my audience to play any of them. Baltimore Ravens at the Los Angeles Chargers. Sunday night. Keenan Allen, fire him up. There's no explanation other than the fact he's great. I don't care what the matchup is. You play Keenan Allen. Odell Beckham Jr., Zay Flowers, it's tough. They're both questionable. Zay Flowers is expected to play. So Zay Flowers may end up actually being a legit start because Odell Beckham is a game time call. So that worries me on a Sunday night game. Hopefully we'll get some news, whether one way or the other he's leaning towards playing or sitting. Don't bank on Odell playing, though. I wouldn't do that. Game time calls on Sunday nights, not a good thing to do. If we get news he plays, I would play him because he's been big play threat for them last several weeks. But watch this Ravens situation here. Quentin Johnston, it's just an embarrassment. That's all I have to say. Chicago Bears at the Minnesota Vikings, the next matchup and the last matchup on Monday night. DJ Moore's must start. The ceiling is back with Justin Fields at quarterback. That's the plain and simple answer right there. Ceiling is back. Floor's always been there, but the ceiling of 35 points to 40 is right there with Justin Fields. Jordan Addison is flexible. I said this weeks ago when they lost Kirk Cousins, Jordan Addison's ceiling would drop, and it has. I was 100% correct on that one. Jordan Addison, great player, really like him, but the reality is Josh Dobbs, very good backup in this league, doesn't have the ceiling of Kirk Cousins. Kirk could throw for 300 to 400 yards in a game. Josh Dobbs can't eclipse 3. There's a ceiling there, which is why you can't start KJ Osborne and you don't start Darnell Mooney either. So let me know what questions you need answered before Week 12 Fantasy Football in the comments below. And if you want to see the must start and sit running backs for Week 12 Fantasy Football, click on this video right here.